Sophie Cunningham's cuddle demand to Caitlin Clark fuels Fever reunion buzz. Say what? Yeah.
When Sophie Cunningham dropped a throwback video featuring Caitlin Clark, the WNBA world erupted. What looked like innocent nostalgia turned into the hottest talking point across the league. Clark's response appeared casual on the surface, but the timing transformed everything. With the league frozen in CBA negotiations, free agency suspended indefinitely, and expansion drafts looming on the horizon, even the smallest gestures carry massive weight. Fever faithful clung to every word, dissecting that simple exchange for hidden meanings. Sophie Cunningham isn't the only piece Indiana fans desperately want back. Kelsey Mitchell holds equal status in their hearts. Yet while Mitchell's on-court dominance speaks for itself, Cunningham's magnetic off-court presence has created an unshakable bond with the Fever faithful that transcends statistics. And here's the rehook, but could this online banter actually reveal Indiana's championship blueprint? Every social media post now gets analyzed like a strategic chess maneuver. Sophie's playful comeback about cuddling and home-cooked dinners seemed lighthearted, but it exposed something deeper, the genuine connection binding this roster together. That chemistry matters tremendously as brutal roster decisions approach. The real firestorm is just beginning. Indiana faces impossible choices about who deserves protection when expansion teams begin their player hunt. Securing Sophie might cost them another valuable contributor. These are the agonizing decisions that haunt front offices through sleepless nights. What began as a simple nostalgic moment now feels like a warning shot for the brutal choices ahead. Sure, everyone was joking around with typical teammate energy, nothing controversial there, but look beneath the humor. Caitlin Clark doesn't engage casually on social media unless genuine comfort exists. Sophie's response reveals her clear desire to remain part of this family. In today's WNBA, these public signals carry more influence than most people acknowledge. What's really at stake when star players start signaling their preferences? Before diving deeper into Indiana's roster calculations, we need to address the toxic reaction flooding the comments section. Within minutes of the post going live, certain fans twisted innocent teammate banter into something ugly and invasive. One comment even questioned Caitlin Clark's personal relationships based purely on friendly online jokes. That's where reasonable fandom crosses into dangerous territory. This represents the harsh reality for high-profile athletes today. Two teammates share a laugh online and suddenly strangers manufacture fictional storylines completely disconnected from basketball. Let's establish the facts. Caitlin Clark maintains an openly committed relationship with Connor McCaffrey. Sophie Cunningham is straight. They're friends and teammates having fun on social media, period. Now let's focus on what actually impacts the league. Sophie Cunningham has cultivated legitimate star power. In 2024, she ranked as the second most searched female athlete across all sports in the United States, not just within the WNBA. That level of visibility creates value teams absolutely cannot dismiss. She co-hosts a podcast on the Volume Network alongside Colin Cowherd, makes frequent appearances across major sports platforms, and commands a fan base extending far beyond traditional basketball circles. That mainstream reach factors heavily into every serious front office strategy session. But here's where the story gets fascinating. Sophie spent just one season in Indiana, one single season, and somehow skyrocketed to becoming one of America's most searched female athletes. That meteoric rise didn't happen by chance, and it extends well beyond her personality or podcast gigs. The real secret? The platform itself. Playing alongside Caitlin Clark bathes everyone in an unprecedented spotlight. And the burning question remains, how much is that spotlight worth? Indiana isn't merely assembling a team anymore, they're operating on one of women's sports' most massive stages. That reality completely transforms how they evaluate every roster maneuver. Now the Fever face a treacherous situation driven by league expansion. With Portland and Toronto entering the WNBA, Indiana must prepare for an expansion draft, forcing them to expose portions of their roster. Most expansion formats permit only 5 or 6 protected players. Zero flexibility. Caitlin Clark gets automatic protection. Aaliyah Boston is secured. Lexi Hull stays safe. Aaliyah Boston and Alyssa Smith represent core foundational pieces. Those selections already consume nearly all available protection slots, leaving perhaps 1 or 2 spots for everyone else. That's where the genuine tension ignites. Both Kelsey Mitchell and Sophie Cunningham hold unrestricted free agent status, and both have publicly expressed desires to remain in Indiana. On paper, that sounds like fantastic news. The front office possesses sufficient cap flexibility to re-sign both players if they choose. The complication? Timing. If Indiana re-signs both players before the expansion draft, they're forced to protect both. That consumes precious protection slots and leaves other contributors dangerously exposed. Every decision now carries cascading consequences, and there's no clean solution. Here's the terrifying scenario. What happens when Indiana chooses not to protect Sophie Cunningham to preserve limited roster slots? That's when everything could unravel spectacularly. Portland and Toronto won't enter the league timidly. They're building from absolute zero, which means they need players capable of generating immediate buzz. Sophie fits that profile perfectly. She's a dependable rotation player, but more critically, she delivers instant name recognition. If left unprotected in the expansion draft, she has virtually no chance of slipping through. But will Indiana gamble and lose their secret weapon? New teams crave players that fans already know. Players who can appear on local radio shows, podcasts, and media tours while actually attracting genuine listeners. Expansion franchises lack the luxury of waiting years to establish relevance. They need recognizable faces, compelling voices, and magnetic personalities immediately. In a league where Caitlin Clark just propelled attendance and television ratings to historic heights, visibility matters more than ever before. Sophie represents precisely the type of asset front offices circle early in expansion drafts. But there's another dimension that never appears on spreadsheets or search engine rankings. You witness it watching actual games. When Caitlin Clark absorbed hard fouls last season, when defenders crossed acceptable boundaries, one player consistently stepped into those heated moments. Sophie never backed down. She brought edge, toughness, and protective presence exactly when it mattered most. That physical response carries genuine significance. Every superstar needs someone willing to absorb contact, establish a tone, and let opponents understand there's a price for crossing lines. That role lacks glamour, but it's absolutely critical to team identity. Losing a player like that isn't merely a marketing setback. It fundamentally alters the team's identity on the floor. Can Indiana really afford to lose their enforcer? Sophie Cunningham brought something to the court that no statistics can adequately capture. When Caitlin Clark got pushed, knocked down, or physically tested, Sophie consistently stepped forward. Not later in press conferences, not through social media posts, but right there in the critical moment. That immediate response establishes team tone and builds locker room trust in ways numbers never reflect. Indiana had players posting superior statistical lines last season, but nobody matched that specific edge. No other player consistently demonstrated the same willingness to physically defend the franchise superstar when games turn physical. In a league where Caitlin Clark will continue drawing extra defensive attention, having someone ready to intervene holds genuine value. Kelsey Mitchell absolutely deserves inclusion in this conversation. She's averaged approximately 17 points per game and served as Indiana's most reliable scorer for years. From a pure basketball analytics perspective, she's the safer choice. If decisions relied solely on points and efficiency metrics, this wouldn't constitute a debate. The problem? Indiana might lack the ability to protect both unrestricted free agents. If forced to choose one, the basketball logic and the bigger picture might not align. Mitchell is the stronger on-court producer, but losing Cunningham could damage the team in ways far harder to replace. Sophie delivers media attention, fan connection, defensive toughness, and natural chemistry with the franchise cornerstone. Those traits don't come easily through free agency or the draft. And here's what everyone's wondering. Can intangibles outweigh statistics? That's precisely why the Instagram exchange mattered. It wasn't random timing. Caitlin Clark didn't merely joke around. She transmitted a clear message. When a generational talent publicly signals she wants a specific teammate retained that deserves serious attention, not just to maintain her comfort level, but because she's identifying a fit that might not be obvious from spreadsheets or conventional scouting reports. When you examine beyond the statistical lines, Sophie Cunningham's impact becomes significantly clearer. Last season, Indiana didn't just improve, they completely transformed their entire identity. A franchise that lived in the lottery suddenly found itself competing in the playoff race. Caitlin Clark's arrival obviously played an enormous role. Aaliyah Boston taking another developmental leap mattered tremendously, but veterans like Cunningham helped stabilize everything surrounding them. Sophie understood exactly how to function alongside a ball-dominant guard. She didn't require the spotlight or constant touches to remain engaged. She concentrated on the details that don't trend online, taking charges, spacing the floor perfectly, knocking down open shots, and delivering physical defense every single time she entered games. Her energy off the bench consistently changed game tempo. Those represent the exact traits teams seek when building around a young star controlling the offense. Sophie never demanded plays designed for her. She never questioned her role. She handled the gritty, thankless work that championship teams rely upon and let the stars shine brightly. But can role players really make or break a championship run? Timing adds another critical piece to this complex puzzle. Free agency cannot officially open until the CBA gets finalized, and those negotiations remain stuck on revenue sharing and salary cap structure. There's no clear timeline. It could resolve quickly or drag on longer than anyone anticipates. Once finally resolved, everything will accelerate rapidly. Free agency will feel rushed, and expansion draft preparation will hit immediately afterward. Indiana doesn't get time to sit back and monitor the market carefully. They must decide now who they value most and who they're willing to risk exposing. That's why the social media moment carries weight. It pulled this conversation into public view and made it significantly harder for the front office to ignore what their franchise player is clearly signaling. Here's another scenario receiving insufficient attention. What if Sophie Cunningham ends up in Portland or Toronto and actually blossoms as the face of a new franchise? She's 28, right in her athletic prime, and she's already proven her ability to draw attention beyond basketball. Place her in a featured role where the spotlight belongs entirely to her, and it's easy to envision her becoming a breakout franchise figure. She might not transform into an all-WNBA first-team selection, but that's not the only meaningful measure of impact. Expansion teams prioritize connection above all else. They need players fans immediately recognize, players who sell jerseys, energize arenas, and give cities someone to rally behind passionately. Sophie checks those essential boxes in ways few available players can match. If Indiana lets her walk for nothing or loses her unprotected in the expansion draft, that's a valuable asset vanishing with zero return. Could Sophie become the next expansion success story? That type of decision can haunt franchises for years, especially when she potentially thrives elsewhere and becomes a centerpiece in a fresh market. The counter-argument is straightforward and completely valid. The Fever cannot manage their roster based on emotional connections or social media engagement. Winning basketball still matters most. Kelsey Mitchell is the superior scorer. Lexi Hull demonstrated genuine growth last season. Nalissa Smith was drafted second overall for excellent reasons. If protecting Sophie means exposing one of those players, the basketball logic becomes uncomfortable. But modern professional sports don't exist in a vacuum anymore. The gap between on-court value and entertainment value has significantly narrowed. The WNBA just secured a media rights deal worth approximately $200 million annually, a massive leap from previous agreements. That enormous jump didn't come from postseason drama alone. It came from unprecedented attention driven primarily by Caitlin Clark. The league is finally being valued for how many eyes it attracts. In that evolving landscape, a player like Sophie Cunningham carries weight that traditional statistics don't fully capture. Sophie might not carry an all-star label, but she's a name casual fans actually recognize. She's someone people tune in specifically to watch, and that matters tremendously in today's WNBA. That's why Indiana finds itself stuck in a situation every front office absolutely hates. Multiple paths forward exist, and none of them are clean. One option, bring back both Kelsey Mitchell and Sophie Cunningham, protect them in the expansion draft, and accept the risk of losing another valuable contributor. Another route, focus on Mitchell, let Sophie hit free agency, and hope the market breaks favorably for Indiana. There's also the bold move, prioritizing Sophie because of her off-court reach and on-court fit with Caitlin Clark, even if that forces a painful decision elsewhere on the roster. What's crystal clear? Where the players stand. Caitlin Clark has made it known she wants Sophie back. The fan base has been vocal and passionate. Sophie herself has shown genuine interest in staying. The uncertainty sits squarely with the front office and how they weigh what she brings versus what they might sacrifice. Which path will Indiana choose? If Indiana chooses not to protect her and she lands in Portland or Toronto and quickly becomes a fan favorite, that decision won't fade quietly into history. That's the kind of franchise-defining move that gets replayed and analyzed for years, especially when the franchise superstar publicly signaled her preference. This isn't merely a routine roster adjustment. It's a choice that could fundamentally shape Indiana's entire offseason and influence how the organization is perceived moving forward. Sophie and Caitlin want to run it back together. The challenge is figuring out how to make that happen without creating another vulnerability through expansion exposure. This entire situation ultimately comes down to one critical thing. Indiana isn't just deciding between individual players. They're deciding what kind of franchise they want to be in this transformative new era of the WNBA. The league is evolving at breakneck speed, and teams that don't adapt will fall behind just as quickly. Caitlin Clark is the absolute center of everything Indiana does now. Every roster move, every protection slot, every calculated risk must be measured against building the optimal environment around her. Sophie Cunningham isn't perfect, and she's not an all-star caliber player, but she brings toughness, visibility, chemistry, and a willingness to handle the uncomfortable work that superstars don't have to do. If the Fever find a method to retain her without gutting the remainder of the roster, it sends a powerful message that they understand the delicate balance between winning games and building something sustainable long-term. If they let her walk or leave her exposed and she thrives elsewhere, that decision will follow this front office for years to come. This isn't just about one expansion draft or one off-season window. It's about whether Indiana recognizes the historic moment they're in and acts accordingly with wisdom and foresight. The next few moves will reveal everything about how seriously they're taking that enormous responsibility. The championship window is open. Will Indiana make the right call?